I find now that I am what some people refer to as a gay elder, or as I like to say, a gay geezer.
Ooh, alliteration. I love it.
I do too. Gay geezer. I much prefer it to gay elder, which sounds so sort of highfalutin.
Oh, do you think?
A gay elder, it's a respectful thing to say, but it makes me feel old. Gay geezer makes me feel sort of fun and young still.
Hello, my name is Kay Anderson, and this is Lost Spaces, the show that is all about lost queer spaces. Only it is not really about that at all. It's about the memories and the stories of the people who drank there and danced there and, dare I say, fell in love there. Every week I speak to a different person and I find out what relationship they had with a particular queer space and how it helped to shape the person that they have become. So, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of excited about the idea of being called a gay elder at some point in the future. The only thing that worries me about it is this idea that potentially people are going to expect me to have my shit together and be wise and clever and stuff. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And although this week's guest, Eric Marcus, who is from the Making Gay History podcast, might not like the idea of being referred to as a gay elder, he certainly has the credentials to bear this title. You probably already know about the Making Gay History podcast, but just in case you don't, it is an oral history podcast that explores different parts of queer history. So they have had seasons about the AIDS crisis and what it's like to grow up as gay in the 70s. And the new season, which is out now, is celebrating the 55th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising by exploring the myth and the legend behind what that night has become in our collective memories and sharing stories from people who were actually there and actually lived it. But anyway, before he was a podcast host and before he was a gay geezer or a gay elder or whatever you want to call it, he was a baby gay in New York City. And it was here that he had an adventure or two or 73 on the dance floors of the gay bars of Manhattan, one of which was the wonderfully named Ice Palace. Shall we find out what he got up to whilst he was there?
I grew up 15 miles east of Manhattan in the borough of Queens, which is part of New York City. But on the subway trains, our equivalent of the tube, at my subway station, which was 2 stops before the end of the line, there were 2 arrows. One arrow pointed to Jamaica, that was out further east of where I lived. The other sign said, to the city. That was to Manhattan. It wasn't to Manhattan, it said to the city, and that's how we thought of it in Queens. I went to Manhattan twice a year as a kid. Once around Easter for my sister's birthday. My grandmother always took my sister and her girlfriends and me to see a movie and a show at Radio City Music Hall. In those days, you saw a movie first, and then there were the Rockettes after, and then we'd have lunch. And then we came at Christmas time to see the tree at Rockefeller Center. I did not see Greenwich Village until after I graduated from high school, even though the subway line I lived on went to Greenwich Village and would get you there in about 35 minutes.
So what were you doing when you were rebelling as a teenager? Why didn't you go into the city?
I was so not a rebellious teenager. There's a book that I love that I read early on. It was written in the mid-'70s. The pseudonym of the author was John Reed, I believe. It was called The Best Little Boy in the World, the BLBITW. So for guys of my generation, they know what the BLBITW is. Those were the best little boys in the world.
Wait, I don't.
Yeah, but Americans. BLBITW.
Okay. But wait, does it mean something else? Am I being really stupid?
No, it just means the best little boy in the world. BLBITW.
Oh, okay.
It's the title of the book.
I thought it meant something dirty.
No, not at all. No, best little boys were not dirty. We just wanted to play cowboys with other boys.
That sounds pretty dirty.
Nice cowboy playing. It's clean, good, clean fun. I did not rebel. My big rebellion was to come in late for my senior prom, I think by a half hour.
Ooh, Eric.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Didn't take drugs. Being gay was such. I remember thinking, and I didn't believe in God, but I still said this: how did God do this to me? Because I was a good student, I didn't take drugs, I didn't drink, I didn't stay out late, I got good grades, and yet there was this one huge flaw. My big rebellion was when I told my mother I would not come back from college just to mow the lawn anymore. My other big rebellion was when I was 15, and my mother had an Indian guru. I don't come from the most traditional family. My mother was a disciple of a man named Sri Chinmoy, who had groups around the world, and he was based in New York City. And my mother wanted me to go with her to meetings. She wanted me to be a part of this, and I refused. Mm-hmm. And that really was the first time we came to emotional blows. She was furious. But she shouldn't have sent me to Orthodox Hebrew school. I was not about to bow down to some guy from India and meditate. The whole idea was repulsive to me. So my parents were both seekers. My mother was a vegetarian. My father discovered yoga in the early 60s. All I wanted, and we were working class, and all I wanted was to be a nice middle class, achieve the middle class, and lead a normal life.
Ooh, so how do you define normal?
Conventional, heterosexual, married, house in the suburbs, white picket fence, 2 children. I want to be an architect or an urban planner.
Oh, sounds pretty boring, Eric.
My life has been anything but boring. I'm really lucky that I'm gay because it set me on a trajectory that was much more interesting than what I might have pursued otherwise.
Well, so let's talk about this, because you said that when you were the best little boy in the world, when you thought about your homosexuality, you thought of it as a flaw.
Yeah. Because it would ruin my life. I grew up in a time when there was no visible path for a gay person in the world, mm-hmm. in work, in life. My first book, The Male Couple's Guide to Living Together, had a subtitle that said, "In a world where everyone says it can't possibly last." And I wanted to be in a relationship. I wanted a boyfriend. I wanted a permanent boyfriend. And there was nothing like that, not that I knew of. And in terms of career, I faced challenges in my early career because I was gay. There were doors that were closed to me because of who I was. And I realized early on that I was not built for being in the closet. So I came out fairly early for my generation, I guess, at about 17 in college, just before college.
Yeah, really early.
And I wound up being the first in any number of work circumstances. When I worked at CBS News in New York, I was the only out person on the editorial side at Morning News in 1988, mm-hmm. which is crazy.
But so when you say coming out at 17, is that the whole shebang? Is that like friends, family, everyone? No.
No, it was 17 was when I first told myself I was gay. It was the first time I'd had a sexual experience with a man. Uh-huh. On July 31st, 1976 through August 1st, 1976. Unforgettable.
Wait. How do you know that? Is it because you wrote it in your diary? And if so, do you have the diary nearby? Can you read out the entry?
I don't keep a diary, but I could tell you the entry. It was the first time in my life I felt normal. The first time in my life that I felt normal was when completely unclothed with my neighbor, Bob, who was also completely unclothed, and we were wrapped in each other's arms, and I thought, this is what it feels like to be a normal human being. And so it was such a profound experience that I knew that I could tell you the hours.
With your neighbor, though, did that have repercussions later on?
No, he was a college student who rented a room in 2 houses down from where I lived.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean the story is a little creepy because of how we were introduced by the man who owned the house he lived in. It's a story I tell in our season Coming of Age during the 1970s. But Bob was a very sweet man. I was 17, he was 23, very nervous about me because of my age. I was not nervous at all because of my age. I dragged the poor young man home. I would have died if I hadn't gotten him home that
Ripped
night.
his clothes off.
Just about. And he said, I can't believe this is your first time. I said, well, why? He said, because you seem to know what you're doing. I said, I have fantasized about this for years. And I'd fantasized about him for months because I had seen him walking to and from university, which was a few blocks away. And he was heaven to me.
But okay, so
Yes.
this is going to be a really naive question that I ask.
Yeah.
So apologies.
No, never apologize for a question.
No, I apologize for everything. It's just my nature. How did you pluck up the courage to be like, hey, would you quite like to get naked with me and rub
Well,
body parts together?
It was gradual. So we got to know each other over the spring of 1976. And there may have been a little bit of knee against knee under his kitchen table when the person who owned the house he lived in wasn't home. So it was gradual. There was some making out on the floor of his room. But he was very cautious with me, so it was pretty mild stuff. And then he asked if I wanted to go to a movie, which I thought of as a date. And we went to see a movie called A Very Natural Thing in Manhattan about two guys. And then we went to a gay bar, my first, Charlie's East on 3rd Avenue around 36th Street. Scary place to me at that age. And then we headed back home by subway, and we were almost beaten up on the subway by some kids who recognized us to be gay guys, but we outsmarted them. And I remember being on the sidewalk in our neighborhood in Queens, and I said, "You're coming home with me." He said, "I can't." I said, "My mom's not home. My sister's going to be leaving for work early in the morning. My mother was traveling somewhere." And I do have a memory. I may have made this up. It's a long time ago. I do have a memory of physically.
No one's going to object. So
No, and if Bob is out there listening, and he's still around, he's in his early 70s, and he's as a nurse anesthesiologist. But I'm not going to tell you his last name. I probably physically dragged him a bit of the way, but I also knew he liked me and was physically attracted to me. So it required some persuasion, but not so much.
all the signs were there. You just needed to nudge or drag. Yes.
When you asked about the courage, it wasn't courage. I was compelled. I was so so hormonal. I was a 17-year-old boy in heat, and I had to have him.
But you were also the best little boy in the world.
I was, but
This was overriding hormones.
completely.
overridden.
This is
Okay.
brainstem overriding frontal lobe. It was just totally brainstem. And when Bob said no about, because he was my sister almost caught us. He was terrified. When he said no, I very quickly was in hot pursuit of someone else I knew who was gay, who I found attractive. So my nature.
Wait,
Yes.
what? Okay, what? So you had this one occurrence with Bob, and
Yeah.
then he cooled off, and you were like, "Oh well, forget you. I'm on to the next one." Is that
I
what
didn't
you're
quite.
saying?
I didn't forget him, but I thought, okay, who next? It's like I really like that. Who next? And I either knew or suspected that the son of the people we had bought the house from. We had just moved to. My mother bought a house. We had just moved to a house after living in a tiny apartment because my mother's mother had died, and my mother inherited a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. And I had met the son of the people who owned the house, and he said, "If you ever need any advice on things, I managed all the mechanicals of the house." So I called him and said, "Yeah, I could really use some help with the boiler. Can you explain?" And then somehow got him to invite me over to his apartment.
But it was your boiler. Why did you go to his apartment?
Well, no, first he came to check out the boiler, and then I somehow managed he invited me over. I don't know how or why. I've forgotten.
Okay.
But then I pounced. So even though I thought of myself as the best little boy in the world and present myself as such, and have for most of my life presented myself as such, the true story is a little bit more interesting, and not such an innocent. So I'll just give you an example. When we did our season Coming of Age during the AIDS crisis, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was my fear of the likelihood that I contracted HIV, which I in fact did not. Mm-hmm. And I counted up the number of men I had slept with between coming out in 1976 and 1981, when the first article was published in the US. Rare cancer in 41 homosexuals. And I think in the episode, I said something like 20. And then in the second episode, I had to cop to the fact it was a few more. And ever since then, I've added a few more and few more. And my producer for that series, Sarah Birmingham, who's the founding editor and producer of Making Gay History, Sarah teases me that the numbers keep creeping up and that I have presented a false impression.
Well, it's hard to keep track, though. I mean, cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to remember everyone?
But I presented as the best little boy in the world, and the best little boy in the world doesn't sleep around. You know, he meets a boyfriend, falls in love, and that's it for the rest of his life.
I don't know. Maybe we should redefine what the best little boy in the world does. Because I think that being friendly and accommodating is quite a good thing, right?
I actually think having a good number of sexual partners for all people is a good thing. So that once you do wind up in a relationship, you never have the feeling of, oh my God, what did I miss? I didn't miss anything. I can look at a guy and think, I know what he looks like, probably without his clothes on. I can guess what the range of experiences is going to be like. And most of the experiences I've had with guys, not so great or okay, some spectacular, but for the most part, not so memorable.
But it's fun to find out, right? Like, it's all about the journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely fun to find out. And it's interesting, and I've met some really wonderful people along the way.
That is such a pageant answer. Anyway, we are here to talk about Manhattan. This is how we got to this point in the conversation. You had said that even though you were living in Queens, you didn't properly go into Manhattan on your own until you were a teenager.
Yes.
So what did Manhattan represent then?
A little scary. I can't believe I wasn't curious. I'd never been to the Metropolitan Museum until I went to college. I went to college at a place called Vassar College, 2 hours, actually 90 minutes north of New York City. And we were sent on assignments to Manhattan, to the Metropolitan Museum to write about a particular sculpture. And then I had friends then in college who grew up in Manhattan. While I was in college, I slept overnight for the first time in Manhattan, and I was smitten with Manhattan. I loved urban life. I loved being able to walk everywhere. It was a quick falling in love with Manhattan and all the wonderful things that Manhattan had to offer.
And was one of the other wonderful things that Manhattan had to offer clubs and boys to kiss?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So why don't we talk about one of those clubs and then the boys that were in it?
Yes, we can. We can. One of my favorite places was called the Ice Palace, and it was located on West 57th Street in Manhattan. It was downstairs, and it was beautiful. It had risers around the dance floor, great lights. I'm sure it had a disco ball. It had a really nice bar. Yes, of course. And I don't recall necessarily the first time I went, but I do recall going with a friend from college one night, and I think he expected we'd arrive together and leave together. That was a real break in our, I mean, not leave as in boyfriends, but that I wouldn't abandon him in...
I interpreted what you said differently.
No, we were just friends.
But you were in there and then off like a shot.
Not quite. Stuck a while. No, I was with him for a while, and then I don't remember if I asked Don Miller to dance or he asked me. But he was a standout because he was wearing cowboy boots, tight jeans, a pressed plaid shirt, and he had a cowboy hat. He was a strawberry blonde, about 5'7", and built. And so charming. And had a great voice and a great laugh. And he asked me to dance. I think Last Dance, Donna Summer was playing.
Aww.
Yeah. And I must have suggested at some point that he come home with me, because I remember being on the F train, which used to go to where I lived. They've since changed the route slightly. I remember being on the F train with him late at night. It was probably 11 or 12 o'clock at night, sitting with this man who had cowboy boots and tight jeans, a pretty tight shirt, and a cowboy hat. You didn't see this in New York City then. And I left Jed at the Ice Palace. He was so mad at me. I remember being on the phone. I was in my mother's bedroom.
Did you tell Jed you were leaving, or did you just...
Oh, yeah.
him? Okay.
Yeah, I was leaving. And Don was only going to be in New York. That night was his last night. And so I thought it was now or never. He was going back to Austin, Texas, where he was already done with college, or he was doing his law degree. I can't remember now. He's a few years older. But I had a habit of developing crazy crushes very quickly. And I was smitten with Don Miller. And I said to Jed, I can't pass up this. Or I said later when we spoke by phone, I just couldn't pass it up. And we wound up becoming long-distance boyfriends out of that. Yeah. I mean, Don wasn't the only person I met at the Ice Palace. There was one other, but significant.
Yeah.
Really significant.
And on one of the first times you ever went there.
That's right. Yeah, it was, and it wasn't a huge place. There are other places like 12 West, which was in the far west. I guess what's the meatpacking district now. It was a big warehouse-like space, which I thought was horrible.
Well, let's not talk about that then.
Yeah, and it was a sweaty place and all that. What I liked about the Ice Palace was that it was, I guess, upscale. The people dressed well. The music was great. There weren't people having sloppy sex on the dance floor.
Oh, and that's a good thing.
Sloppy sex on the dance floor. And I didn't like that. That wasn't for me.
I want to talk about Don a bit more, and I also want to find out about Jed a bit more. How long was that long-distance relationship?
Several months. I mean, it's tough long distance. I went to visit him in Austin, Texas, which was a whole other cultural experience.
Like everyone's wearing cowboy boots. What?
Everybody. Oh God, Texas was a real revelation to me. It went on for several months. There were love letters back and forth. He wrote poetry. He sent me a gold ring in the mail, which I had until fairly recently. He really wanted to be boyfriends, and I was still young. I believe I was finishing my sophomore year, and then I was going to be at school for another semester and then off to Europe, and I wasn't ready to settle down. I wish I had saved all of his letters and poetry.
Me too.
Yeah, it would have been good stuff. I still have some in my storage locker.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the reason I ask is because long-distance relationships, I've never known one to work. Oh, someone's going to tell me I'm wrong. I've never known one to work, but every single one I've been in has been so intoxicating at the beginning because of all of the promise and my ability to fill in the gaps with my brain.
Of course. That's exactly so. I know long-distance relationships that have survived when the couple had enough time at the beginning to establish the relationship where they were together. But building a relationship long distance when I was only 19, not possible for me anyway.
Especially because of all those hormones that we heard about earlier.
Yes, they were still there. But I saw Don. We continued to remain friends and sleep together occasionally. I saw him. He came to visit my senior year when I was researching my book. Making Gay History. The original one was called Making History. And I was in Los Angeles. I stayed with Don, and we remained good friends. And then I got a call, so it would have been the early 90s, from one of his friends who I knew and said, if you want to see Don alive, you better get on a plane. I had no idea that Don was HIV positive. I had no idea he was sick. I could not get on a plane. I didn't have money to do that. And he died, I think, a week or two later.
Shit.
Yeah. So, he was a good guy and such an exuberant personality. I was just going through photos recently and came across photos from when I visited with him in Texas. And we went swimming in Austin, there's a quarry where people go swimming. And he was so young and had this beautiful triangular shaped face and this big smile and big bright teeth and big head of strawberry blonde curly hair, and so alive. So, and that fate befell the other guy I met at the Ice Palace too.
Oh, are you okay to talk about him?
Oh yeah. So I was at the Ice Palace by myself, and this would have been in the late 70s. In some ways, I can't believe I had the courage to go by myself. I really think I was so hormone driven.
Yeah, I was going to say, again, I will point you to the hormones that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Because now, I'm not single, but if I were single, I like to go to bed at 9:30. And the idea of getting dressed up and going out and looking for guys, I don't think so.
No, you never get taken over by the spirit of adventure.
I love adventure travel, but not spirit of adventure involving men. That's the last thing I would want at this stage of life. I have a wonderful spouse, and I couldn't be happier with my life and relationship. So I was at the Ice Palace, and I saw this beautiful young man across the dance floor. He was on one of the risers, because there are steps down to the dance floor. And he was wearing paratrooper pants, those baggy paratrooper pants, and an olive green. I can't believe I remember this. This is almost 50 years ago. Is it 50 years ago?
This is in keeping with everything else you've told me, though.
What do you mean?
There's quite a lot of detail in all of the stories you're telling.
But there's so many I don't remember anything about. And there's some I'm not sure, I can't remember if I actually slept with them. But I remember Daniel. And an olive green tight T-shirt, tall, brown hair, couldn't see what color eyes, and just a beautiful face and lean body. I did not have the courage to go up to him and ask him to dance. But lo and behold, there was a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and it was Daniel, and he asked me to dance. And it turned out that he was in New York from somewhere in the Midwest, I think from Cleveland. Oh, pretty sure from Cleveland.
You're like collecting every state here.
I know. Texas, yeah, I know. Ohio. I haven't told the story about Daniel in so many years. Such a sweet young man. He was there as a gift from an older man who was interested in Daniel, but Daniel was not interested in, who brought him to New York for his high school graduation present.
Oh.
Who had designs on Daniel, but Daniel was not interested. So I somehow arranged to a friend.
Wait, sorry, just a clarifying question here. Was that man on the trip with Daniel, and was he in the Ice Palace?
He was not in the Ice Palace. Daniel was there by himself. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I was surprised at how young Daniel was. I was probably 20, maybe 21. And he was 18, which I was surprised. He looked older. And he just graduated from high school. And then I had a sense of how anxiety-producing it might have been for Bob, who was 23 when I was 17. But 18 at least was of age. So I arranged, as Daniel asked if was there anywhere we could go together. Not to have coffee, just to clarify. And I said,
Not to have coffee. So what else could there be?
There could be getting naked and doing things that men do. So I mentioned to a friend, I don't remember how I mentioned it to him, but anyway, he offered his apartment. And I met up with Daniel. I don't remember where we met up, somewhere in Midtown. And I had been living at home in Queens. It must have been during a summer. It was June, because I brought him a rose from my rose bush.
Aww.
I know.
Yeah, you are the best little boy in the world.
I know. I brought him a rose, and we spent a really nice afternoon at my friend's apartment. And then I saw him again in California when I was, after I graduated, I became a tour director. I got a job as a tour director. You know, those people who stand on a bus and they take tours.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked on a tour from San Francisco, California to Calgary, Alberta, 1,500 miles, 14 days, 11 hotels, 44 passengers.
Wow.
And I was based in San Francisco. And Daniel was going to be in San Francisco with a friend of his. And so I saw him there, and he stayed with me at the hotel. And we corresponded for a while, and then he disappeared. And in those days, when you disappeared,
Yeah.
it meant you were dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Daniel. Daniel and Don. Yeah.
So again, going to ask a naive question. So
Yeah.
sorry. Did you write to everyone after you shagged them? How many pens did you have on the go?
No, not everybody. Not everybody. Certainly not everybody, but people who I liked. Daniel I really liked. Don, it was a boyfriend for a while. No, I didn't stay in touch with. I'd say that was a fraction of the men.
Okay. Okay, good. Because I'm feeling guilty here that I don't even swap names. I'm like, see ya.
No, I always wanted to know the names. I can't remember all the names,
really?
but I always wanted to know. I always wanted to know who they were. I was not big on anonymous sex.
But what difference does it make if you know their name?
I could fool myself into thinking it wasn't basically anonymous sex.
See, yeah, I just think, if I ask them their name, they tell me their name, and then I get their name wrong, that's worse than just not knowing it at all.
That would be worse. That would be worse. Yeah.
Oh, so there's one thread that's still hanging from these stories, and
Yes.
that's Jed.
Yes, he never forgave me.
Really?
No, he was really wounded because I betrayed a friendship.
For that one time? Or did you do it over and over and over again?
No, it was that one time, and I'd say our relationship was somewhat fragile, and he really was somebody who was a really good friend to people, and I broke his trust as he perceived it. He's also dead, not from AIDS, but he died a few years ago.
Oh, is it that kind of teenage black and white thinking of like, you're with me or you're not kind of thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sad though.
Yeah, but I've done plenty of things in my life where I have not been able to earn forgiveness. I shouldn't say plenty, but enough things where I wasn't very thoughtful. And often where I was, where I let my hormones get the best of me. Or as one person said to me, I had a dick for brains. Said unkindly. It was not said in jest.
But only one person. It's pretty good.
Only one person ever said that. There were others who I'm sure thought it.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, let's not dwell on that.
Okay.
Why don't we go back to the Ice Palace?
Yeah.
What else do you remember about that space?
It was fun. It was unlike my memory of other places where there was intense cruising. It felt low key. You could go and not necessarily pick someone up. You could go and dance. And you could dance without sweating through your clothes. Because it was a bit of a dress-up place. Not fancy, but like Daniel had thought about what he was wearing that night in his paratrooper pants and olive green tight T-shirt. And Don thought about what he was wearing with his cowboy boots, tight jeans, plaid shirt, and cowboy hat. And it was a place where people from all over came. But it was, looking back on it now, it was probably somewhat exclusive, not in the best sense of the word, but exclusive in who came. It was, my memory was basically white gay men of a certain age and a certain appearance who could afford to pay whatever the entry fee was, and I don't remember what that was. I'm not sure there was an entry fee. I don't recall. I don't recall. And that's unlike Studio 54, which I went to, which was sort of high pressure, different kind of experience, or Charlie's East, which was smoke filled and very cruisy. It was just fun. It was fun. It was fun, and I felt comfortable. So that has a lot to do with it.
Well, do you remember hearing about it closing, or do you know how it closed?
I don't. What changed for me was that I entered a relationship in 1983.
Oh, I think I know what's coming.
And what could that be, Kay?
That you dropped out off of the scene and stopped going out to clubs.
Yes, in fact. Yes. So I can't tell you what happened between 1983 and 1992 in terms of clubs. I can tell you what was out there briefly from 1992 to 1994.
And then you were coupled down again.
And then I was coupled down again. Yep. So my memories of clubs really are 1970s. And I can't even say that when I was briefly single, I went to one bar and it was so awful, I never went out again.
Oh, we've all had those nights.
Oh, it was terrible.
So then, how did you discover that Ice Palace had closed? And was this interview the first time that you ever thought about it since the beginning of the 80s?
I don't know when it closed. I didn't follow its history. I think about it. I think about it occasionally. Yeah, absolutely. I find now that I am what some people refer to as a gay elder, or as I like to say, a gay geezer.
Ooh, alliteration. I love it.
I do too. Gay geezer. I much prefer it to gay elder, which sounds so sort of highfalutin.
Oh, do you think?
A gay elder, it's a respectful thing to say, but it makes me feel old. Gay geezer makes me feel sort of fun and young still.
Smarmy and like from the East End, yeah.
Gay geezer. Well, yes, there's that too, but more in the fun sense. I think about the past. I think about the men I knew who I cared about and sometimes loved and who are gone. And that takes me to the Ice Palace. Or I just wished my first half of my sophomore year, my boyfriend then, I just sent him a birthday note. So we're still in touch. Oh my God, there I am confirming what you think about me.
Wow.
We still wish each other happy birthday. I think of him and I think of where we met at Deja Vu in Highland, New York. So it's also time and place. I'm sure if I walked into a place like the Ice Palace now, it would not feel as it did then. I was 20. I'm 65. I was hormonal. I am not anymore. Some ways, much to my relief. Do I like to dance? I love to dance. There aren't the same opportunities at my age, except at weddings and bar mitzvahs. But there are not really clubs for people my age, and also the clubs. Even if I wanted to go, it's late at night, and I keep a pretty steady routine.
As you mentioned, you want to be in bed by 9, so yeah, it's not on the table.
So I wake up at 5:30 or 5, and so it's
really.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Like out of choice.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I wake up. That's when I wake up. So if I don't go to bed at 9:30 or 10, I'm a zombie. And I have a pretty strict exercise regimen, too, that requires a big time investment.
So clubbing out. But if we think back to the Ice Palace and what that space meant for you in the time that you went there, what do you think it taught you about yourself?
That is a good question. It taught me that I was desirable, that someone like Daniel, because I have something of an ugly duckling story. I was a really unattractive kid. And
but were you actually an unattractive kid, or is that a story that you tell yourself?
When I was really young, I was really unattractive. When I was a teenager, I was really skinny, and I went from being unattractive to okay to what, as I came to understand, was very attractive to other gay men. So the Ice Palace being there gave me confirmed or gave me the sense that I am attractive to someone as attractive as Daniel. And also a sense of confidence that I could meet someone like Don and say, come home with me. And it was just, I just assumed he would say, actually, I assumed he'd say yes. I was lucky. I take no credit for my genetics. My grandmother tells a story, or told, she's now dead. My uncle and father were both very attractive. And my grandmother said she would tell my uncle that he was never to take for granted his appearance, and that his appearance didn't mean that he was necessarily a good or a nice person, and not to use his appearance to take advantage of anyone. Because you can use it also to manipulate people and as a weapon. At the Ice Palace, the fact that I was attractive and attractive to other men made it possible for me to, in those two cases, be with men who were memorable, really memorable, and were physically heaven, you know. And I was able to really just be myself.
Can I ask a question about this ugly duckling thing?
Yeah.
Was it easy to just shed the self-image of yourself as an ugly duckling? Or is that something that you still carry?
Well, I don't look the way I did. So it's, if you have the experience of going from an ugly duckling to being a desired person, and also someone who used their attractiveness for whatever, in whatever ways were useful.
To call the men to your shores, yes.
Or, just for work or for whatever, and how people respond to you. And then when you get older, things change. One of the funny things that people have said to me over time, because I'm a somewhat public person, is when they've seen pictures of me when I was young, oh, gee, you were really attractive. It's like past tense. Yeah, I know. And like, is that you, or did you look like that? It was an adjustment. Because I couldn't understand, this is now when I was a freshman in college in particular, I couldn't understand why men were pursuing me the way they did. A senior showed up at my door who I knew was gay. He was like 6'3" and like 6'5" in his clogs. And I was scared half to death. I was sort of barely out. And I was pursued by older men also who worked at the college, a professor, a person from the administration, and also women. I had women who threw themselves at me. And it was very confusing. Because that was
and are
not...
you still writing to all of these people? Like correspondence?
No.
Are you wishing them happy birthday when it's their birthday?
No, they're all dead.
Sorry.
Including the woman who threw herself at me died. The friend who sat me down to have a chat with me, because I was pretty distressed actually about it, especially one woman who threw herself at me and I didn't know how to say no. And it was a terrible, actually traumatic experience. I wound up in the infirmary at college, my freshman year, and almost dropped out of college because of it. And my friend sat me down, and she was older, she was a transfer student, and she said, you have to understand that you are very attractive and that both men and women will pursue you. And you have to learn how to manage that. And I really appreciated that conversation because that was not my experience in high school. I was one of the nerdy kids, not a cool kid at all, and not attractive to anyone except for one girl in particular. But she wasn't the kind of girl who threw herself at anybody. So it did take adjustment, and it was not a smooth adjustment, and I often handled things badly. Shall I tell you how badly?
No, but you're just you're making me think like, wow, what a heartbreaker.
Well, yes, so that for people who pursued me maybe I was a heartbreaker, but I wound up in many situations having sex with men who I really didn't want to have sex with because I felt like, oh God, I must have flirted with them, or I did something to make them think that I wanted to sleep with them.
So now I owe him.
Now I owe him. And I had many of those experiences until I figured out how people experience me and how to handle their reactions to me and how to say, oh, that's really nice of you, or no, I'm not attracted, and oh, please let me out of here. Or you misunderstood me. There were a lot of those experiences, a lot more of those experiences than Daniel and Don at the Ice Palace.
I think,
Yeah.
see, because, going back to what we said before, I think I'm like you in that I am very sensitive and pick up like really minute body language shifts or things that are changing with people. But I think I struggle with understanding how people perceive me. And maybe that's because of poor self-image. I think I'm always just like, oh, they must think I'm terrible or they must think I'm stupid. And so I just don't pick up on things that people are putting down in relation to me.
I think it's really hard to have a sense of who you are objectively because we inhabit these bodies and these minds.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very fortunate to have a friend who was blunt enough to sit me down and literally sat me down in the dining room at college. And she said, we need to talk, and told me how I was perceived. It took a long time for me to understand. And I'm not ashamed to say it.
But it's also difficult. And sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It's also difficult because you're not perceived the same in every situation unless you're a one-dimensional person.
That's right. Yeah. And I didn't realize I was flirtatious, and I didn't think of that as necessarily being something that would elicit a response in the other person to want to sleep with me.
Yeah.
I was aware of having power over other men, especially older men, but was not skilled enough to modulate that power so that it didn't come back and bite me in the ass.
So that they would buy you dinner, but they wouldn't expect you to have sex with them afterwards. That kind of level, right?
Oh, I had those. I did know once. I went for a job interview. In fact, it was the boyfriend I met at this other place, Deja Vu. He was leaving a job as an administrative assistant for a high-level public employee, and he was trying to pass the job on to someone else who was gay because his boss was closeted, and probably about my age now. And he took me for the interview at a bar called Rounds, which I knew to be a hustler bar. It's very fancy. And midway through the interview, he said, I'd like to see you with your clothes off. Apropos of nothing. Of nothing. I mean, he was old. He was gray. He was 62 or 65. And I was 22, maybe. And I was not flirting with him. This was a job interview. I had the presence of mind to say, what did you say? He said, I'd like to see you with your clothes off. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And then we went on to the rest of the conversation.
Did you get the job?
What do you think? Come on, you get one guess, Kay. One guess. Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah, you took the job and you got a yearly bonus, double your salary.
If I'd slept with him, no, I didn't. I did not get the job. He was pathetic. He told me he was a grandfather already, and he said that every night after his wife went to sleep, he would go down to his den and pop a videotape of the movie Making Love, starring Michael Keane and Kate Jackson and Harry Hamlin, and he would watch that film and cry.
He told you this in the job interview?
Yeah.
God, I've never had a job interview like that.
Well, it's the only job interview I had like that. I did have someone else who hired me for freelance work who would have hired me for more if I had slept with him. So as the world turns, this has been the way it has been for women for forever, and I'm sure for gay men too,
Yeah, but other than me, apparently.
Hasn't happened.
No.
Good,
no.
lucky you. Lucky you.
No, lucky me, sorry. Yeah, I'm just acting salty for no reason here. I don't know how I would respond if that happened to me.
Let me tell you, it's I could still see the guy across the table saying, "I'd like to see you with your clothes off."
Oof.
And that was Rounds. That was not the Ice Palace. At Rounds, you saw, it was on 53rd Street, between Lexington and 3rd, if I remember correctly. Older men, well-dressed, often in suits or coat and tie, and really beautiful young men who were there.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything like that in the UK.
I don't think there's anything like that in New York anymore.
Yes, why not?
Because that's not how business is conducted anymore. It's all with apps and online.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, I see.
You don't have to go to a beautiful bar, restaurant, and check out who's there. Although, I'd rather do that than order someone online.
Yeah, me too. Because you need to kind of gauge their energy, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I'd rather judge somebody by their energy than a picture of their dick.
Well, both would be preferable.
Both, yes. Okay. I grant you that could have bearing, but you can't always trust pictures.
Before I let you go,
Yes.
if you think back to the best little boy in the world, the one who wasn't even a smidge curious about Manhattan, but knew that he wanted to be normal and was afraid of this thing that he was. If you could give him any advice, what would it be?
That's a very good question. It's one I have been known to ask in a similar fashion. But, actually, I'm not sure I've been asked that question before. I would say to him, you are normal. You will get to have the life you want, but you'll wind up having a life that you could never have imagined. Never in your wildest dreams could you have imagined that you would have the professional sex, oh my God, the professional success. The professional success.
Why not both, Eric? Why not?
Well, I know, right, but yeah. Professional success in an area, that I thought that being gay would ruin my life. And I struggled to get away from what I call my gay work for years. Yet it has been the most rewarding part of my career. I live comfortably in a way I didn't even know to imagine, with a man I could not have conjured. It's complicated as are our relationships. I would simply say, it will be okay. It will be okay.
As I said at the top of the show, the latest season of Making Gay History podcast is out now. So make sure that you go and stream the show wherever you find podcasts. You can also find out more about the show by following them on Instagram. And it's very easy. It's at Making Gay History podcast. You can also find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. And you can find me on TikTok at Lost Spaces Pod. If you got a kick out of this episode, I would really appreciate if you shared it with one or two other people and just said to them, hey, I think you would like this too. And I know that seems a bit silly and a bit weird, but it really does make a difference when new people find this show. Right, I think that's us for this week. My name is Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.